Yes, welcome everyone to Fluoride-Free Campaigns. It's a monthly gathering of fluoride-free activists from all over the world. We're gathering to help each other in our local, state, provincial campaigns so we can learn together, share information, share inspiration, and share our stories about our campaigns and get support for one another. We're following along with the book, Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Fluoridation in Your Town. And today we're going to be focusing on step 3, mapping your jurisdiction. So we're really for the first time getting our hands dirty in politics. The first step was really getting the campaigner, the fluoride-free campaigner, clear about the nature of the beast, of the deception. Confronting the deception was the number one step, because we all have to recognize that ending fluoridation is not like other political campaigns. It's not like any other issue at all. So step 1 was very important for the average campaigner to be successful, so that you're not kidding yourself about what you're up against, and also how to talk about this very strange conspiracy, shall we say, the continuation of mass medication despite all the evidence showing it's harmful. And then in step 2, we addressed how to protect ourselves, not only for the importance of course, protecting ourselves and reducing our fluoride exposure on a regular basis, but also as a campaigner to be helpful to others that you meet along the campaign trail, because one of the first questions they're going to have for you when you're successful is, how can I avoid fluoride? And you want to be a kind of an expert for them and to be able to help them decide for themselves, given their particular circumstances, the best way for them to either filter water at home or purchase water or whatever it works for them, and thereby increasing your credibility with them. But today we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to get busy with politics. Fluoridation began with politics and it will end with politics. And a lot of people who determined to end fluoridation are amateurs. A lot of people who who learn about fluoridation and see it as a crime, or see it as an offense against personal choice, or see it as a real deleterious effect on our overall well-being and health, and want to end it, they find themselves naively entering into politics. And so that's actually why I wrote the book, Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Water Fluoridation in Your Town, because I made the same mistake years ago when I determined that I was going to end water fluoridation in 2012. And in that time, I was pretty confident that, a little bit of logic, a few emails to the city council, that should take care of it. It's so obviously not right. What I've learned the hard way is that politics, first of all, is not like business strategizing entirely. There's some overlap. And it's really, politics is its own skill set. And so the book itself, I recommend that you read it cover to cover to establish for yourself really a foundation for the best practices of being a fluoride campaigner in this time, in this day and age, and to learn all the things you need to learn in order to be effective. So today, again, we're starting really for the first time getting into politics for real. And that's a good thing. So next month, we'll be looking at strategizing. Today, I'm going to ask you to put aside strategizing for the time being. What's more important, this step 3 is more important right now, is initially to understand your jurisdiction, to know your jurisdiction very well, whether that's your town, your county, your state, your province, where you live, and to understand by what authority does the utility in your area fluoridate your water? Where did that authority come from? What law, what ordinance, what regulation covers fluoridation in your area? How did it come to be? And therefore, how to get it out? Because again, next month, we're going to start talking much more about strategy. And in order to speak well, in order to do well with strategizing, you need to understand the terrain you're in. That's why we call it mapping your jurisdiction. So you want to know about the laws that cover fluoridation in your area. You want to know where the wells are or where the water's coming from, even the very plant where the fluoridation is introduced. You really want to map your area and have that available for yourself, of course, but your team as it grows. Everyone will be operating from the exact same information. Fact-based information. Of course, it'll come in handy when you're communicating in your campaigns to be able to educate people about the laws that affect fluoridation, as well as, where the water is being fluoridated and all that good stuff. But again, as an activist who's working now in politics, you need to know the laws that apply and where you can eventually be successful in changing those laws. That's what we're going to focus on today. And so again, we'll take a little time just to explore this topic to get people level set about the importance of it, what's required to do well with mapping your jurisdiction. And then I'll want to hear from you all about your jurisdiction, what you've learned about how water fluoridation plays out in your area and how you came to learn it and how important it has been to know these facts in your campaigns. And that way we can all learn from each other about how best to map our own jurisdictions. And then after that, we'll take some time with the remaining time to hear about your campaigns as they're going on right now. You can share with others what's working, what's not working, what your challenges and what your wins have been. We can celebrate with you. We can offer you resources if that's what you're looking for in the form of material resources or good old moral support. We can support each other in that way. So again, let's start with mapping your jurisdiction. I'm going to say a few words. I recommend the book. It's all there in the book, but there's different levels of jurisdiction to start with. So we can even start with at the international level. There are indeed international rules and laws that address using the water supply as medication or fluoridation. The Nuremberg Code, the United Nations, UNESCO has some things about fluoridation. So it's good to be familiar with those, how much those international rules apply to you or how much the legislators and the politicians and the agencies in your area, how much they recognize the authority of those international bodies is one thing, but it's certainly helpful to have it. Today, we won't be spending too much time on those, but really most people are facing local legislation or that is in their city or county, and then the state or province. So you need to do some research, get online. We're very lucky these days to have pretty much all the information we need at our fingertips. We just start searching online. I'll recommend other search engines besides Google. There's something called DuckDuckGo. I don't vouch everything for them. I'm not sure if they're clean as a whistle, but I can tell you from my experience that when I'm researching certain topics like fluoridation, it's much more effective in getting to what I want. Google definitely suppresses searches related to fluoride, just your straight google.com searches. DuckDuckGo actually uses the same set of data. They piggyback off of Google's data, but they have a different algorithm in terms of deciding what to display for you on the first page. So anyway, get to work with your research. I'm also using a new AI tool that I'll just quickly plug. Again, I can't vouch for its ultimate, whether it's ultimately a good thing or a bad thing in the world, but you may have all heard of ChatGPT. It's a handy way to ask questions. Like I was asking, for example, what San Francisco law authorizes fluoridation of the water? I live in San Francisco, right? And it came back with an answer, pointing me to a section in the San Francisco Health Code. When I looked up that health code, I didn't find anything about fluoridation. And I wrote back, Article 12B refers to boring of wells, not fluoridation. And the chat came back saying, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Here it is right here in front of you. Because again, this is a research project for every one of you. Before next month, I invite you all to use the time before we even begin with step 4 to map your jurisdiction, to know very well. And it's not going to be immediate. It's not going to be easy because, for example, here in San Francisco, we began fluoridation in 1952 based on a 1951 ballot measure. And see, even here, it said the article to fluoridate in San Francisco, adopted by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, was not exactly correct. And we have back and forth with the chat here, but the chat even apologizes when they're not right. But what actually happened was that the Board of Supervisors placed the item on the ballot. That's one of the authorities that the Board of Supervisors, I think with not a majority vote or maybe 2/3 of vote of the Board of Supervisors, can put a measure on the ballot for voters to vote on. And that's what happened. And I was curious too, because if you come to think about it, how many people, they did vote it in back in 1951, but how many people, San Francisco was half the size at that time. Not everyone's registered to vote. Not everyone who's registered to vote votes. So even though it passed with 62%, maybe only 100,000, 200, maybe 200,000 people who were alive in 1951 are dictating our public policy today. So anyway, this is something that you want to be really clear about, because I can't tell you how many conversations between now and when you end fluoridation in your area that you're going to have based on your basic fundamental understanding of the legislation in your area and which departments do it. So for example, in San Francisco, originally this ballot measure affected the health code. So this was set up as something good for your health. So it was put under the health department. And then it was the public utility that actually performed the fluoridation. So you want to be clear about the agencies within your town or area that are authorizing it and actually doing it, because they work together. But sometimes in your campaign, you'll be able to exploit the fact that they're not the same agency. Sometimes you'll find in politics, different agencies have their own agendas and they don't always overlap, and they try to play together. They try to create a unified front, but when activists are effective, sometimes they can drive a wedge between these agencies. So it's good to know which agencies are you dealing with. And then, well, we have to address this topic that's known as the state mandate. So if you're in Australia, maybe you have a provincial mandate, or like in Ireland, it's the whole country is mandated. I think the United Kingdom, that legislation they just passed last year was countrywide mandate. In Brazil, I know that they have a nationwide fluoridation mandate. We use that term familiarly. It's not actually, the word may not be mandate in the legislation. It just says that every county, every city with a certain number of people of a certain size are required to fluoridate their water, for example. That's similar to what is here in California. So in San Francisco, even though that ballot measure was passed back in 1951 and the utility began fluoridating in 1952, the fluoridation rules were removed from our ordinances, our local ordinances, because in 1995, in our state capital, Sacramento, legislation was passed to mandate, yes, that every municipality of a certain size has to mandate their water. So San Francisco basically now refers anybody who wants to talk about the legal authorization for fluoridation, they refer us to the state. And that way they don't have to deal with it. So this is a very important thing. Obviously, when you're campaigning, do we lobby our state representatives or do we lobby our local representatives? If we're going to do a ballot measure, how can we do a ballot measure, a local ballot measure, if it's going to conflict with the state mandate, so to speak? So these are a lot of questions that we'll get to next month. But first and foremost, you need to understand the basic fundamental facts of the legal authorization in your area. And then it's also important to know the actual infrastructure of your water system sufficiently also to speak to that. So for example, in San Francisco, we have an extraordinary source of water. It's the Sierra Nevadas. And over 100 years ago, 110 years ago, folks had the foresight to build an aqueduct well, first of all, to build a dam in this huge reservoir up in the Sierras, collecting clean snow water, and then to build an aqueduct from that reservoir hundreds of miles to the San Francisco Bay Area. And then that same aqueduct supplies water not only to San Francisco, but to at least half of the Bay Area residents. And the aqueduct and the whole system is owned by San Francisco, and all the various cities in the suburbs, so to speak, they buy their water from us in San Francisco. So if we're in fluoridation in San Francisco, we end it for all of the Bay Area. Again, this is very important to understand, because as far as campaigning is concerned, we can join with others in those smaller towns because they share the same water system. And if the politics aren't favorable, for example, right here in San Francisco, maybe another town nearby could have more success with their city councils. So again, the infrastructure and where the water where it comes from, where it goes, and where even it's fluoridated. So there's exactly one plant in a town. It's not even in San Francisco. It's in a place between that reservoir and the Bay Area where the fluoridation is added. And that way it gets to every town on this system that just happens to be owned by the city and county of San Francisco. So that's my personal example. This is something that every single one of you needs to be very clear about, have it documented even someplace, so that when new people come onto your campaign, you're able to hand them a very simple page or 2 or 3, maybe with a map on it. It's on our website, Safe Water San Francisco. So we can hand it to people and they can come up to speed, and everyone's on the same page as far as what are we dealing with? How did we get here? And what is this legislation? What is the legal authority that we need to overturn in order to be successful? So thank you for letting me describe all of this. Again, it's in step 3, mapping your jurisdiction, from the book, Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Fluoridation, which I highly recommend that you purchase and read from cover to cover. And then come to these monthly gatherings so that we can talk about them, explore more, and give examples that we have from all over the place. All right, so yeah, let's open up the discussion. I want to hear from you all about how did fluoridation get authorized in your town? How is it continuing to be authorized? What legislation or rules or ordinances keep it in place? By what authority is your utility adding fluoridation to your water? Where are they doing it? Who does it affect? Just so you get clear. And I would love to hear about your personal stories about how you came to know this. How was it hard to do? Was it easy to do? How it's helped you in your campaigning to know the basic facts of the legislation and the infrastructure of your water supply. So who wants to go first?
Marie from Arkansas. So I learned in 2015, a state law went into effect called Act 197 that mandated all water supplies that serve 5,000 people or more must fluoridate. So I immediately tried to talk to my representatives and stuff about changing that. And that had been tried a couple times, and there's going to be a little bit of traction, but then it has to go through the House and the Senate and through committees on each one. And it's the health committee. So even if the representatives are all behind it, then it goes to the committee. Well, if this small committee disagrees, then it's out the window. It has to pass the committee. And then it has to go to the other entity, the House or the Senate, and get support there, and then go to their committee. That's my understanding of it. So people have tried it, and they've gotten, politicians have tried it, and they can't get enough support. And but there's a renewed energy. So all of our little water companies, and you guys may know Andy Anderson in Ozark Water District.
Is that the name of your water district?
No, I'm in Marion County Regional Water District. I'm like a next door neighbor to his. But his water district just planted their feet and says, we ain't going to do it. And state of Arkansas, you just try to make us. And so they've got a legal battle. Well, my water district, they go, oh, the state said we have to, so we have to. and we're not going to argue with them. And that's what I get from healthcare professionals. When I say anything, oh, well, it's the law. Well, yeah, it is the law. Well, it's the law. And that they stop right there. It's the law. But Andy's group, this has been years now, and they're getting fines, daily fines. And I think it's coming to a trial. Of course, they don't have a lot of money for lawyers and stuff, and they maybe made a few mistakes strategically, but they're still fighting the state, and hopefully things can change before they have to go all the way. But he's such a bold, he's an older gentleman and just fighting this with a passion, and he inspires me.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's so much in what you were just saying. So the law isn't always as black and white as people think it is, you know. There's a lot of ambiguity in laws that you can exploit. And so as you see on the campaign trail, when you're talking to people and they say, well, it's the law. If you're able then to respond with information about what the law actually says, or to whom it actually applies, or the ambiguities in it, or maybe even, you know, the legal question that this fellow is taking up in court, you know, that can help people think a little bit more nuanced and understand that it's not so black and white. The other thing very important about what you said is, and I didn't mention it when we're talking about mapping your jurisdiction, is to speak about these regional authorities. Okay, so typically people think of cities and then counties and then states or provinces in kind of an order like that. But then we have multiplying almost out of control in the last several decades all over our regional governments. And they take their authority across city lines, across county lines, sometimes across state and provincial lines as well, because the matter that they're governing crosses the line, like water, for example. You know, waterways don't always obey city and county lines. So over the years, people have created these governmental agencies that are not as responsive to we the people, because they're not elected by us so often. They're appointed by the people whose jurisdictions that region overlaps with, and thereby creating another layer of government that is one more degree removed from voters. So you need to be very cautious and conscious of these regional authorities that claim, especially water district authorities. There's a county north of here on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge called Marin County, and the Marin Municipal Water District fluoridates their water today, but it only covers geographically maybe 30% of the county. It just happens to be the 30% where everyone lives. Most everyone lives, and the rest, it's all very rural, and there's not as sparsely populated. So and then that regional water district has 5 different sub-districts that have a representative that each person is elected to the water board, this commission. So you need to understand these regional water boards, who sits on them, who's on the water commission, how are they put there, how are they elected. We need to really you have to not miss that if in case you've overlooked it before, the regional areas, not just your city, county, and state. So yeah, thanks so much, very much. Who else? Who wants to talk about your particular jurisdictions? You're going to find, right, Colin, there's a lot of variety. There's no one, it's not like a cookie cutter at all. Every place around the world is somehow a little different. We learn so much. So what's it like in your part of the planet?
Yeah, Clint. Well, we got 6 states, 2 territories in Australia, and I live in one state that doesn't have a state mandate. So the local councils mandate it. But one thing we're all missing here is whether it's a local council or a water board or a state owned corporation, they're all corporations. So they're covered by corporate law. And then I just asked Microsoft's chat about corporate law in Australia. And they said all the usual things. But it says at the end that it also interacts with other areas of law, blah, 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 and consumer law. So anyway, I've discovered I'm probably 1 month ahead here, but all corporations have a complaints process, and normally they either have a contract with their customers or an implied verbal type contract. And especially in my area, there is no contract, but down in New South Wales, Sydney, they actually have a multi-page contract. And nowhere in that contract does it mention fluoride or dental treatment. So you can put a complaint in and say, well, I've contracted for drinking water. You're supplying me with a dental treatment or water with an enzyme poison added. And then once you make a complaint, you put in a resolution. Well, I'll start paying bills again. I'll fulfill your contract as soon as you take that out of the water. And to do that, you need to tell the politicians to take it out of the water. So that's the resolution. You get it back to politics. Your masters who tell you to put it in the water have to take it out if you want me to pay my bills. And the other note I just noted there, most fluoridation laws have a limit population-wise. Here we have mainly 1,000 people per town. Under that, it's uneconomic, so they don't have to do it. I think Arkansas just said 5,000. I think in Tasmania, they've got it down to 500. But that's, you could complain, well, that's discrimination. If I live in a large town, I'm discriminated against. I have to get delivered the poison and I have to pay for it. If I live in a small town, I don't get the poison. I got to look after my own teeth. Anyway, that's
All right. Well, you did
another jurisdiction is corporation law.
Yes, that not what I expected to come out. I'm very happy to hear about that. I myself have been exploring the various common law approaches to change. Get to get real creative, you know, these days. A municipal corporation is not considered the same as like a corporation that does commercial corporation that you're familiar with versus a nonprofit corporation. There's different kinds of corporation. Yes, there's corporate law that potentially could apply to municipal corporations in the same way that we think of commercial corporations. At the same time, I'd just like to know maybe the more vanilla jurisdictional issues for where you stand. Like, does your town, is it your town, Colin, who fluoridates, or is it a water district that extends beyond your town? Who actually claims the authority to fluoridate where you live?
Yeah, in my state of Queensland, they provide legislation for, it's now local councils can mandate it.
So your local council has an ordinance on the books, is that right?
I don't think they do. In 2008, they were mandated. The water was mandated, but in 2012, it got changed from a state mandate to allow councils to mandate. And I think they may have had a vote, they may not have had a vote, but anyway, they just continued the mandate.
Right. Because when you get involved in making a change, you're going to need to know these details. When you go to lobby, if it turns out that lobbying your elected officials is the route you want to go, you'll need to have that. Even if you're just talking to the average concerned resident who may be interested in joining your campaign, sooner or later, they're going to need to know the basic information about which utilities is doing it and where do they get their authority.
Well, I do have at the moment, I've skip ahead again to allies. There's a new group started up Australia-wide, and each local community is starting this little community group called My Place Australia. And the premise is people are sick of what's happening to them, the overreach of government, especially over the last 3 years. You've got to be mandated certain medical treatments for some people, and you're lied to about these treatments, whether they're safe and effective. So anyway, this local My Place Australia has almost 100 local My Places. And in my state, about half of the fluoridated councils are opening up one of these My Places. And I'm working with one particular one at the far north of the state, and they're very keen to send letters of complaint to the council. They also have a common law group, got a couple of very nice letters. Withdrawing consent is one of their letters. That's mainly about CCTV cameras, but it could be easily converted to forced fluoridation.
Very
It
good.
violates bodily autonomy. So that's one of the allies, but letters of complaint, they have to answer complaints. Most corporations have a complaints policy. And you can either stop paying your bill or you just send in the letters, send in complaints, the resolution, and see what they say. They'll come back with a lot of rubbish, usually.
Yeah.
But my actual water supplier won't answer my complaints. They said, well, we talked to you about this years ago, so we're not answering any more questions or complaints. Now that's not, they're violating their own complaints resolution policy. And the
Right.
longer they don't resolve it, the longer I won't pay my bill.
Yeah, we want to hear about your local campaign, but already from what you're saying, we can see how your understanding of the jurisdiction in which you live informs your strategy. And that's what's important for people to understand here. Once you really understand the true authority by which your utility fluoridates your water, then you can go to work in a variety of ways. You can use your creativity then to construct your strategy based on the actual reality of your jurisdiction. And something you said also reminded me, Colin, to tell everybody to look at other legislation as well. For example, here in California, as I was saying, we have the 1995 quote unquote state mandate, but we also have even longer period of time, we've had, I don't know, some people have heard of famous Prop 65 California. It's basically prohibits any carcinogen being used anywhere in the state without, in some cases, you can put a warning label and continue to do it, but you have to put a big fat warning label on it. And fluoridation, as we know, is a carcinogen, so it belongs in that. So there's actually two state legislations that are in conflict with one another. This is something that we could exploit. So
the contaminants in the fluoride chemicals, some of them are also carcinogens. I think arsenic,
exactly.
beryllium.
If you understand your local or regional or county or state rules against contamination, as I was looking into our water ordinances, looking for anything about fluoridation, I couldn't find it because, again, they've moved the authority to the state level. But still, there are rules right here locally that don't allow.
That's another complaint.
The introduction of any kind of poison into water that's designed for human consumption. So again, something that you need to understand about the laws relating to water quality, clean water in your area, environmental hazards, environmental pollutants of all kinds, because then fluoridation would be something, obviously, that that would run afoul of those rules as well. Something for everyone to know about your area.
We also have a group on the other side of the country where fluoridation is about to be brought in a few months or sometime this year. Anyway, they put in a petition complaint, It's a town of 35,000 people or 17,000 customers, and 233 people signed this petition. And I've checked out their data. If they all stop paying their water bill, that'd deplete their profit by 15%. So if they got a few thousand people, that'd wipe out their profit completely. And that might put a bit of pressure on them.
Absolutely. All right. So let's learn about another jurisdiction. And you can see how there's just a different, every time you go to a different place, there's a different set of rules, different configuration. It's astonishing. Go ahead, Karen.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I am in Massachusetts. I parked my car in Harvard Yard, and I was in Gloucester for most of my life. I recently moved to another community, and I was fighting fluoridation in Gloucester. And so I got into the Massachusetts law. At that time, my ward counselor was a lawyer, and he told me it was the oddest law he ever saw, because in Massachusetts, the Board of Health, which, by the way, is the operating arm of the Department of Public Health, which is operating underneath the direction of Health and Human Services, which has a $100 million budget to promote fluoridation, back to the Board of Health. The Board of Health can order it into the water. Now, in Massachusetts, if you gathered enough signatures and you had a referendum and you banned, and you said you didn't want fluoridation, you could stop it from the community from being fluoridated. And my community had stopped it, I think, twice before, but every couple of years, the Board of Health is able to order it back in again. And so they did. And once it's in, according to the law in my state, Massachusetts, there is no mechanism to take it out. The Board of Health would have to order it out, and they're not going to do that unless Health and Human Services in Washington says so. However, in my state, there is something known as home rule, and I just put a link into the chat line about home rule and Dillon's rule. Home rule says that the legislative body of the community can petition the state for an exemption to a law. So in Gloucester, where the water was totally governed by the city water department, all I needed to do was to get the city council to vote to have an exemption to that state law in order to establish an ordinance establishing home rule, saying, we won't be the ones who decide about whether we fluoridate or not. And at this point in time, we do not want to fluoridate. Now, again, in Massachusetts, water commissions, which are dealing with providing water for multiple communities, are not necessarily covered by the state law. They have their own version of home rule. They get to promulgate rules and regulations as they see fit. So when you've got a water commission, you can put the fluoride in, you can take the water out, whatever, based on the water commissions. Well, my neighboring community to where I'm living now, they don't have fluoride in the water. I said, thank goodness, I wouldn't have to be fighting on a local level anymore. But the neighboring community got wind that I was a fluoride activist, and so now I'm helping them, and they have a water commission. And so, as a matter of fact, just yesterday, I delivered some letters and things to the water commissioners and to the players in the city hall. And on the 21st, we're going to start the process and continue it. And we have the strategy all mapped out. And it seems as if we don't need to go through the state to get an exception to the law for this situation. Also interesting, in my state, if anybody knows anybody in the Boston area, please let me know. The MWRA has one massive water plant, and they supply water to approximately 3 million people. There are 7 million people living in this state, and they provide water to 3 million of them. And they're taking their fluoridation equipment offline the end of this month in order to install new fluoridation equipment. So I am currently, I've got a similar letter ready to go to the MWRA, and I'm looking for people who live in those jurisdictions to send this to it. Now, the MWRA is going to be a big nut to crack, but the fact of the matter is, we come back to the concept of home rule. A town which is governed under the law can get an exemption to the home rule. No massive votes, no referendums, those don't count. If just the legislative body, which is the city council or the town meeting, says we want to do this. And with the water commissions, it's just if the water commissioners say we want to do it, they don't even need to go to the state, they can just do it. So that's really interesting. Moreover, the other campaign that I'm waging at this point is that strange law we have in Massachusetts, which apparently is similar to a law in maybe 1 or 2 other states, and for which Myron Alukian takes credit for writing. Very bizarre law. I was able to file in the state legislature for the current session, which began in January, a bill to change that law by constituent request. Now, by constituent request are magic words that work in the state of Massachusetts. I don't know if they work in many other states. I know they don't work in all states, but they do work in Massachusetts. I didn't need my senator and representative to go along with me, and they wouldn't go along with me, although I would have loved for them to go along with me. I was just able to say, file this by constituent request, and it's on the docket. That means sometime in the next 2 years, it's going to come up, and it's probably going to go before the Public Health Committee, who doesn't want to give us any love. I've testified before them on fluoridation twice before. But this time, we have the Tosca lawsuit going on. And I don't expect this to come up before the state parties until the end of the year or probably next year, at which point in time, there'll be a lot more information that hopefully can be used by the people that hopefully, now I'm getting to strategy, I've stirred up with the other stuff to testify and to get their representatives and senators on board. So that is my evaluation of the jurisdictional issues in my state. And the 2 things to remember, the 3 things to remember is, once, you've got to really, really understand the law at the state level. And 2, you have to understand the concept of a city ordinance or home rule or Dillon's rule or whatever applies in your state, and how you can get around it if necessary. And there was a 3rd thing, and thing came up and I lost my train of thought. But anyway, you need to understand what's going on in the different areas, and you don't just, nobody's going to hand it to you. Nobody's going to tell this to you. Nobody's going to make it easy for you. You need to leave some blood on the floor before you get it. And that's where I am. Any questions?
No, thanks. Here in California, we're called chartered cities, and that really is you said, it's not something that people will know right away. It's not something that even politicians will mention to you. If you bring to a local politician about fluoridation, well, they'll say, oh, that's a state mandate. They won't tell you that our city is also a chartered city, and we actually have the authority to reject statewide laws because we have it as a home rule, as you call it, where you are, chartered cities where we are. And that definitely throws a wrinkle in things and changes the conversation you have when you're lobbying. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's very important. I don't know how many people here that applies to, but don't just take it, well, the state says it's mandate, so that's the way it is. You know, there is still a vestige of some very local sovereignty. And
Is it, I'm clear, is that what applies to Santa Barbara? Because I believe Santa Barbara is the city in California that has it right on the wall, the website. We are not fluoridated and we have no intention to ever to fluoridate, you know, and this is after the state law said you had to do it. And a lot of cities which said we didn't want to do it went along with it because of the state law, because their city councilor told them they needed to. But Santa Barbara said, no way, Jose.
exactly, yes. That there's the two largest cities in California who aren't fluoridated, in contravention supposedly to this state mandate, are Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz. And it does matter when you're creating your strategy to know that when you're talking with someone, they say, well, what about the state mandate? You can talk to them about chartered cities. You can talk to them about other cities that aren't complying and how there's no enforcement actually tied into that law. So that's the other thing. Read the law, actually get to know the law. Read through it. You'll see that there's a requirement, but there's also no enforcement mechanism if you should fail to. I guess in Arkansas, they're fining them on a that's part of, there is an enforcement with that mandate, but our mandate doesn't come with an enforcement. So yeah, let's see. I do want to introduce another topic of jurisdictional matters in terms of the legal stuff. You see, back in the 50s, when fluoridation was being adopted in cities in California, some concerned citizens like ourselves took up the battle in the courts and tried to stop it through the courts. And unfortunately, they were not successful because the courts ruled and set up precedents that the state of California has what's known as police powers. Police powers is a legal term that's very controversial, but it is in the United States anyway, and perhaps other British Commonwealth countries, there's this idea of sovereignty in the United States, it's of the states. And so many people think, you know, we live in a free country in the United States, and people will point out that our Constitution prohibits the federal government from doing things that they're not allowed to do to infringe upon our rights. However, they will say that the states themselves actually have a lot more power to do things. For example, fluoridate the water for your own good. And it's called police powers. And I know when you think of police, you think, well, what's police got to do with it? But basically, the state and then counties and cities who are subsidiary to the state can hand out badges to health department, agents, to any number of government agents, and make them be the enforcers of the rules. So, for example, in Arkansas, who exactly is knocking on the door saying this municipality is not fluoridating, you need to pay this fine? There is a government agent who's been given police powers to do that. It's not the state police coming knocking the door. It's not the highway patrol. It's not the local police department. It's going to be probably a health department agent or some state agent who has a badge. They've been given police powers. And this is something probably in Australia, I would guess in the United Kingdom, that this is something you may have to deal with. But again, courts have, back in the day, they refused to look at the safety and or effectiveness of fluoridation. They simply ruled on whether the agency, the city, the town, the water district had the authority under their police powers. And that's something that we have to grapple with, something we have to deal with, something we have to face when developing strategies. It's not insurmountable, but if you, for example, are looking at a legal challenge, you'll need to take into account the precedents that's come before you based on rulings to do with police powers. All right, so for those who've just shown up, we're focusing on step 3, mapping your jurisdiction. It's a critical step before you even begin strategizing, which we're going to get into next month. You want to really, once and for all, do the research necessary to understand all the legislation related to the authorization by the municipality or the water district who adds this neurotoxin to your water, the history of it, how does it get into place, and then understand the law sufficiently to know how you're going to get it out. And once everyone on your team is level set, you can use your creativity to go to work. For example, there's a ballot measure that we almost got qualified in Marin County, just north of here, as I was describing. But we did get it on the ballot up in another town north of here, even further north. And basically, it didn't outright prohibit fluoridation, but rather it said that the municipality shall only purchase fluoridation chemicals that come from a vendor who has in writing declared that it's safe for human consumption. And as we know, no manufacturer of these fluoridation chemicals will sign such a thing. So it's a way of circumventing the state mandate and not even having to deal with that. My point is, when you understand the legislation that you're facing, local, state level, you get creative. And that's why it's so important to understand the fundamentals, the facts of your jurisdiction, so you can really look at the situation and to try to devise a strategy that gets you through to ending fluoridation. So yeah, we're inviting people to describe their jurisdictions, especially if they're very different than the ones we've heard about already. What it took to learn all that, and how it's been helpful in your campaign to know the fundamentals before jumping into strategizing. What's going on, Danny?
I'm in Modesto, California, 60 years. I'm 84 years old. Just happened to see your email pop up. I had forgot that you gave an advance notice. So it said this issue today is politics. And so I said, oh, I've got a couple examples of politics.
Specifically, we're looking at the authority that your municipal water utility has to the authority by which they fluoridate your water. That's specifically, we're just mapping the jurisdiction, not strategizing just today.
Okay, our city is a charter city since way back in the 40s or earlier, and we had a young lawyer who was elderly and ready to retire, but he joined us in the third attack he was having on to keep it out of the city. So he communicated every week with the city attorney on the phone and confirming by letter. And he convinced the city attorney, but the city attorney didn't say it publicly, but we heard from the lawyer differently. This is back in November. They had put it on the ballot twice since the 50s, and it was voted out. So we were fighting for the third time. And when the issue first came up, the city council voted 3-2 to put it in and not to put it on the ballot. And so we took issue to that, and we went to every city council meeting every week, got up with our 5 minutes, said our piece, and they said nothing. So we said, well, these politicians, it's like talking to a dead horse or whatever, So we decided to go to the people. And myself, and mainly myself, I got my little 1/4-inch disc out, and I put save on there, and then I started to design a 1-page ad for the newspaper. And the ad was justified in that they had just come out with a when you vote, or when they, or not even when they vote, you have a vote that has to go to the people to pay. Do they want to pay the tax or not pay the tax? I forget what that rule is. 2 something, maybe Chris. Twin. So I took that card that came in the mail and put it into the one-page ad as a clip-out coupon. And then I built around that all the reasons why, neurotoxic and all, I don't even remember the issues now, but they were all negative. And then I also put a little square, little 2-inch by 3-inch boxes with points. And in one of those was the listing of the 3. We have 5 people on the council, including the mayor, and it voted 3-2 to not put it on the ballot. So I put the names of the 3 that voted not to put it on the ballot in a little square. And I said, don't vote these people. They were on term limits, and they were also being voted on for term limits in the next ballot. So put the 3 names in there that the people should not vote for them because they wanted to put the fluoride in our water. And then another box put the 2 people that voted fluoridation out and vote for them. Anyway, it was quite a, and what turned out is a city clerk got 8,000 roughly ballots back in the mail. I mean, we flooded her office with these ballots. Well, we were able, and then a couple of weeks later, after the deluge of the city clerk, we were able to switch one of the 3 that voted not to put it on the ballot to put it on the ballot. So now it got on the ballot for November. And I think we did the newspaper in the early summer. Well, the whole thing was building up for over a year before November, the first week in November vote. And finally, the final vote was 61% voted against fluoride for Modesto. For the 3rd time, the ballot was lost. And the state didn't come after us because we were a charter city and they don't really enforce it. And we had convinced our city attorney to fight it if they did. And that's kind of the gist of that. But
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jenny. That gives us a very good picture. So you aren't fluoridated and you haven't had fluoridated water, right?
we've never had fluoridated water.
Good job. Good
I
job.
wanted to mention one thing. Florida, I don't know if anybody on here is from Florida, but I found out that the 3rd largest budget income is from that Polk County, north of Tampa industry, that where most of the potassium ore is processed, and the secondary hazardous waste is shipped by rail car or wherever across the US, because the dumb cities are signing contracts to get that. But they've had a lot of hurricanes. And well, the main point is the 3rd largest income. You're going to have a lot of political battle there to keep that income coming into Florida. I don't know how to.
Talking about the phosphate mines in northern Florida, you're saying that they're the 3rd largest contributor to the state's revenues?
Yes.
Wow.
That's a statement I heard.
Yeah, we're all up against that's a big topic, just in the industry that profits, obviously. Thank you, Colin. Sums it up in one gesture. Follow the money. So thanks for that, Danny. Thanks for your description of Modesto, and congratulations, you guys.
But the other thing that's recently, we've had these hurricanes up there, and the major company up there, I can't remember their name, was sold to a Chicago company. But that makes a shortage when they can't get in to the rain and the hurricanes. So they go offshore to Mexico and China and all those other countries that supply it, the chemical companies, and they can buy it cheaper because the cost has gone up in Florida. They learn that they can buy it cheaper offshore. So here's my question. How can the EPA allow what they classify as a hazardous waste to have a hazardous waste come onto our shores from foreign countries? How can the USA through the EPA not enforce? We should have a law that says we should enforce that we don't buy hazardous waste from foreign countries and it comes onto our shores.
Thanks for putting that question out there. It does remind me to say to everyone that you definitely, including in your research about your jurisdiction, is to find out where is your municipality purchasing its fluoridation chemicals, and to get the safety data sheet on them, get the manufacturer's details on it so that you know and very clearly where it's coming from, what it contains, how much you're paying for it, because it does actually affect a lot of the legislation. We're talking about these state mandates, for example. They do have provisions in the mandates about how the fluoridation can be paid for. In many cases, it stipulates that the money to pay for the fluoridation cannot come from the water consumers themselves, that you can't just bill them. The municipality has to find funds from some other source. And they do get very creative. There's lots of stories about that, about how creative municipalities have gotten in order to be able to pay for their fluoridation schemes without charging customers. But it's something for you to learn about your jurisdiction, just in case that happens to be the situation where you are, because you can, again, when it comes time to strategize, you can exploit that provision. In the book, Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Fluoridation in Your Town, there's a story about Dr. Kennedy's work suing San Diego because they were paying for fluoridation through the water utility bill, and that was not legal. So that was a big dispute in the courts. So anyway, the point is that's another fact or another research that you all need to do to make sure that the funding for your fluoridation scheme in your area is also not breaking the rules, not breaking a law somewhere. Okay, who wants to go next? Raise your hand if you want to tell us about your jurisdiction, how water fluoridation began. Was it the city council that authorized it by a majority vote? Was it on the ballot? Is this a local issue? Is it a regional issue? Is it a state issue? Is it a combination of those things? Go ahead, Ray.
Me and my friend here, Gilles Perrin, he's also in the chat. We're working on ending fluoridation for Montreal. Montreal City is against fluoridation, but they do it for Pointe-Claire and Dorval, two municipalities that are independent. And fluoridation used to be mandatory in Quebec, in the province of Quebec. But in 1979, the Ministry of Environment put out a document that basically worked on the work of John Remington Graham, and they basically said, look, it's carcinogenic. This is the environment of Quebec. We actually have this posted on our Facebook group page, which is actually the second comment in the chat. You can go there and see it. It's a PDF. I'm sure a lot of people can look at this document and take things from it. Basically says, look, it's been proven in court that it was carcinogenic. John Remington Graham was an American lawyer. He proved in court 3 times, 3 different states. A friend of his, he's actually in Quebec right now. He moved out of the States for some, he was a prosecutor. His life was spreading, so he moved. But basically, he has a lot of documents I'll publish on our page in time. But this document basically says, look, it's carcinogenic, it's bad, it's a mutagen, it's bad for the environment. And after this document was published, fluoridation is no longer mandatory in Quebec, and it was a domino effect. I mean, there's only 3 municipalities with plants that fluoridate in the entire province right now. So I'm working on 2 of them. And once we win this legal action, we're going to send to the city of Montreal in the next month. It will end it for all these 3 places. So Point Claire and Dorval is being fluoridated by Montreal City, which is against fluoridation. They don't fluoridate themselves. Very strange dynamic there. And then there's one more place outside of City Island of Montreal that is already scheduled to end fluoridation, but they're just waiting for their machines to be paid off for that to happen. That's how it is here, is that if you initiate fluoridation, you have to pay off the machines first before you want to end it with the province. So you had some other questions, some points. So it's not mandatory here. We do have the safety data sheet, which we got through a Freedom of Information request. And it clearly says, our lawyer has a friend who's got a PhD in chemistry. And he said, look, you can't even use this stuff to treat water. And the most intelligent people I meet at the door when I was collecting signatures, for those who don't know here, I've got about 5,000 signatures I've collected at the door. And it still wasn't enough because it's political. So we're not collecting signatures anymore. I am handing out flyers, so that's something I have to do tonight. I got about 1,000 here. That's my quota for tonight. So basically, yeah, I mean, the documents we received says it's a hazard for the environment. It just says how toxic it is. It says nothing about dental decay or anything like that. It comes from a company called Brentag, which is an international chemical supplier. That's basically what it says there. It says industrial use only. And there's no toxicology report for this substance at all. That's something people want to look into. It doesn't exist. It's just a good point to bring up to people. I mean, you're ingesting something that has not been, you have toxicology reports for chlorine and most pharmaceutical drugs and stuff. Was there you had some other points?
Let's just, actually just make, so these municipalities, these few remaining municipalities in Quebec, they adopted fluoridation, I assume, before when it was mandatory. And then after the provincial mandate was rescinded, they continued to fluoridate uninterrupted since then?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can't speak for St. George, which is the other place outside of Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand is that, so the city of Point Claire and Dorval started fluoridating in the mid-50s, 1954. We have the original resolutions, which we got from the city through a Freedom of Information request. And my counselor asked him, I'm like, look, why do we still fluoridate? He said it's political. So, the answer is clear. It's just, he basically said, we don't want to make enemies with the Ministry of Health, and that's why we do it. So to answer your question, yeah, so it was a weird dynamic in Montreal. The city of Montreal, which is like the mega city of Montreal, invisible borders, absorbed the non-merged municipalities and then unabsorbed them. So when they absorbed them, they took over the responsibility of fluoridation while they never fluoridated themselves. And then when they unabsorbed, they continued fluoridating for these cities. And they never even passed a resolution to do that. So it could even be illegal. So, I think this is why our legal action, it's perfect. They screwed themselves over in so many ways and how they did it that I'm sure legal action will just end it. It's like, if there was going to be a legal action in the world in a major city that would end fluoridation, this is the place. We're exploiting it. And the city of Point Claire actually took down their website on fluoridation, which is a big political win for us. And then they joined our Facebook group, and then and I kind of kicked them out because I didn't know what they were trying to do, but they actually joined our group. The city of Point Claire joined our group. And so the reason they took down their page is primarily because the city of Montreal, they just didn't want to be involved with it, and they knew that political pressure was coming down. Also, the legal act they cite on their page to fluoridate was expired in 2019. So like you're saying, there's a lot of different cities will use acts and laws, and some of them could be expired if you actually look into it. And our own lawyer, we don't want to show our hand yet, but he found like 20 different laws that this contradicts. So the fluoridation chemical usage. So we do have a fundraiser for legal action. Our notice is done. We have a plaintiff from both Dorval and Point Claire. I'm trying to get more plaintiffs, but we're ready to send this notice. And this can be sent Monday, and it can end fluoridation in the next week. So we're ready. We're right there. So if anybody wants to, donate to our legal action, we have the fundraiser posted there. It's the first comment. And maybe Mr. Parra, he's here. Maybe he wants to say something as well. Gilles?
I could say we have two possibilities. We're sending to the city of Montreal a formal notice, and they will have 14 days to decide whether they stop or go to court. And I suspect that the city of Montreal, which have had two commissions on fluoridation, which conclude that fluoridation was a risk, I don't think they're going to push the issue. It's just a question of being forced to continue because of political pressure of the town of Dorval and Point Claire. But as they are now the owner of the water plant, I don't think they're going to go further than ending the issue. But the provincial government would like to continue fluoridation. It's one of the major politics. But now there's only 3 cities fluoridated, and if Point Claire and Dorval quit, then they'll be just left St. George-de-Beauce. And St. George-de-Beauce have tried to cut off, but the government told them, if you want to stop, then you have to reimburse all the investment that the province have done to supply, because in Quebec, all the equipment and all the fluoridation chemical are paid by the provincial government. We have a law, the public health law, where there's 5 articles in it that says that the government promotes fluoridation and will finance any municipality that wish to fluoridate. And even though with that, we always succeed to end fluoridation or stop the battle anywhere it's at start. And now it's so much political. The population does not want fluoridation. We have been so much in the media that the population is against it. So I don't think the government will even go to fight the issue in court. But we would like to have it in court because we're battling on the charter right, but also on the fact that the chemical are not regulated for the use it's being added to the water for. That means it's added for the water to prevent tooth decay, but it's not regulated by Health Canada as a source of a nutrient or as a drug to treat the people. Only sodium fluoride of pharmaceutical grade is capable to be used as a drug, and it have to be prepared in sanitary condition. So we told the city, if you want to continue to fluoridate, add pharmaceutical grade fluoride. But it would be so expensive that no municipality would ever think about going in that direction.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, is there anything you'd like besides a big hurrah for you? And we can all celebrate here.
Yeah, but we're looking forward to see what will be happening. We're just waiting for 2 papers. And as I told you, I could say, freedom of information, getting investigation. We had for 4 years law student in a pro bono process to look all the rules and laws. We had done a special freedom of information request to Health Canada. It's called a petition to try to get exactly what is the legal classification of the product and who is accountable for the fluoridation. And by the way, only municipalities are accountable for fluoridation in Canada. No one else is responsible for the chemical or for the, I could say a law that would say we're responsible for the fluoridation. So it's always a question of municipality. That's very important to find out. And that's what the point today, very important to know what is a legal element in it and what we could use to fight an issue. And that's very good, Clint. You're really putting a very important point by bringing that up.
Thank you, Gilles. Yeah, it's great to see you here once again. I hope you'll be here with us next time. So yeah, when we say municipality so often too, I do look specifically at who these folks are. Who are the city council members? Who are the ones sitting on the health commission? They have names. They have political careers. They have reputations. They have agendas. They're real people. They get up every morning. They put on their pants. They go to work. It's good for you, for all of us, to have a sense of that they who they are and put faces and names on them for your campaign so that people realize we're not just dealing with this amorphous, government, which seems so overwhelming sometimes. And really, I've succeeded a lot of times by personalizing it and putting these people on the hook. You mentioned the word accountability, Gilles. I mean, we hold the individuals accountable because they sometimes change out, right? So we could say the city in general, but who's right now sitting there in control of the button that mass medicates us? So please get
Very
to know.
strange. In Quebec, we always had the chance to debate the issue in front of the city council or in front of the population in the city council, and we always win. The public health always go out their head between their legs.
I'm a little bit jealous, to be honest. It's good. I'm so glad to hear that. But there's something about you guys, you just get it. It's not, it's not healthy, it's poison, and it's also against our natural rights. And
We had science behind because we had someone from the Environment Ministry, Pierre Gimorin, which is my co-author, always working with us, with also John Remington Graham, which have conducted the tree trial. So when we go to the city, we have something very solid behind us. And that's very important too.
Very good. All right. So is there anyone else here who would like to describe their ongoing campaign quickly? What are your objectives? The outcomes you're seeking immediately and maybe long-term, and then what are the assets and behaviors you have that you're deploying? And if there's any questions you have, maybe people have some experience with similar things, they can give you advice, encouragement. If there's any campaigners here who are in the middle of it and want to describe what's going on and how we can potentially help you. Hello, George.
Hey everyone. So I'm pretty new to this whole fluoridation thing. I just stumbled across the that Fluoride Action Network webpage. I think there was a Substack article on Steve Kirsch's Substack that pointed to it. So needless to say, I was really outraged when I read all the research and everything. So I'm very early in the process. I live in Seminole County, Florida. Somebody mentioned something about Polk County, Florida. They get all their revenue from the chemical mines or whatever. But I live in Seminole County, and so I'm starting the process of finding out how to remove fluoride from our water. Our water is fluoridated, unfortunately. So I did reach out to my local commissioner, just as a starting point, and it took a while, it took a few months. I finally got a reply from not my commissioner, but from some underling, a very general email about why they fluoridate, and so I need to follow up on that, and because it doesn't have any real details in it, but just wanted to let you know that I'm going to try and go down this path. I'll get your book. Seems like that's the next logical step, so that we can hopefully be able to stop fluoridating water in Seminole County.
Yes. Thank you. Hearty welcome to you. Yes. I'm so happy too that as you're just starting out, that you'll read the book, because then you don't have to learn all the mistakes yourself. You can learn from others who've been working on this for a long time. It's a big deal. It's often one of the biggest mistakes is to underestimate what it takes. Thank you everyone for getting into the jurisdiction, mapping your jurisdiction conversation, so that we're all level set on the importance of understanding the playing field that you're entering upon, this political terrain that we're going to be battling in, so that you can be most effective and most creative and most resourceful. I do want to invite you all to make a point of being here again the second Saturday of the month, or Sunday morning down in Australia and New Zealand, because next month we're going to take on step 4, which is figuring out the pathway to victory. And we're going to take what you've learned about your jurisdiction this month and start to look at the broad strategies that you want to take on. So these are the 5 that get addressed in the book: direct lobbying, running for office, the ballot box, filing a lawsuit, and direct action. And we go into detail in all of those things. So you have a kind of a general understanding of them all, the pros and cons that are associated with each one, given what you know about the battle you're facing with the jurisdiction you're in. You'll be able to pick a pathway that's working for you. So I hope you be with us again next month and every day until this thing ends worldwide. That's my personal commitment to you all. I dedicated myself to ending fluoridation. I didn't know what it was going to take. I did underestimate it. I thought it was going to be easier than it is, but here we are years and years later. And I'm just not going anywhere. Let's put it that way until this thing's done. And if it means building an army of people and educating them on the treacherous nature of this particular battle and what you need to do to develop the competencies to be a political campaigner sufficiently to end this one, that's what it's going to take. And the good news is, I like to think if we can end fluoridation, right? When we end fluoridation, we'll be able to end so many things that are wrong with our society, because it's the exact same elements that you see over and over and over again. You know, this last 2 years, 3 years, it was not surprising to me at all, because the same language, safe and effective, the same people, the same bodies, the same media, the same academics, the same players coming together in a unified voice telling us how great fluoride is. It's something you'll learn to recognize. And this particular formula that they use to foist upon the people things that they want to do for their benefit, but obviously to our disadvantage, we will be able to then move on from fluoridation and fix a lot of other problems as well, because it's the same formula. These gatherings are being recorded so that they're available online for review. They do go month by month, step by step, along with the book, so that by the end of the year, we'll all be level set in the most fundamental things about campaigning in this particular fight against fluoridation. So we have, yes, that's right. Woohoo. And we're going to do it together. I'm so grateful. It's one of my favorite days of the month, obviously, coming together with you guys. Some of the best human beings I've ever met on the planet are fluoride-free activists, people with integrity, people with commitment, intelligent people, people who are ready and willing and able to get up and do something about this thing. So thanks so much for being my companions along this journey, this very important journey.
Just 2 things. Political donations. You can go on a site called opensecrets.org, and you could put in fluoridation, or you could put in key people you think are getting donations. They're not bribes, they're donations. And we found when California was voting on the statewide fluoridation to put it on the ballot, and we found the names of 10 state politicians that received from the ADA $10,000 each as a donation for their campaign during this issue. And it's not a bribe, it's a donation.
Yeah, opensecrets.org, correct?
Correct.
It's definitely a handy website. When you're a politician, you want to find out where is this money coming from? All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, my last words is communication and networking is our key to success. Is because we're only succeeding now is because, like 30 years from now, we weren't able to see, they made it, at least in Quebec and in Canada, it's a municipal thing. And, when people woke up, little groups of municipalities, they were never communicating with each other 20, 30 years ago because they didn't have the internet. But we got the internet now. And, if you want support, just go on Facebook, type in, fluoride in groups, and you can see what groups are working on this project. It still seems splintered in the groups. And I think more groups need to come together and work on strategies and fundraising and stuff like that. So I'm saying the internet is your biggest tool now for spreading the information quick, for communicating. I use websites like White Pages and True People Search too. That allows me to, find, in the United States, as I mentioned this a few times ago, is that in the U.S., cell phone numbers are public records, so you can find anybody's cell phone number. You can find their. It even gives you their email addresses too, and websites like True People Search and White Pages. So I'm saying that, and those are free services on those websites. So the internet is our biggest tool right now because it's why we're winning more views in the last 10 years than we did in the last 50 years before that. So use technology.
Very good. I wish you all a great day. Blessings and good fortune to all of you in your campaigns. And we'll see you here again in another month.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Glenn.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
everybody.
Thanks.